Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I am so excited about tonight. I know it's lame, but it is a beautiful fall evening. My husband and I are going to catch up watching American Horror Story. We've watched 3 episodes, and we're going to watch 3 or 4 more episodes so we get caught up. And I'm hoping that we get pizza because I'm really craving pizza tonight for some reason. I don't know if I want Papa John's or if I want Pizza Hut or if I want, what's the other one that we go to sometimes? Oh God, I can't remember it now. But anyway, pizza sounds so good to me. Hot box pizza, I love. Their breadsticks are really good. So anyway, or maybe Donato's pizza? I don't know, we'll see. So anyway, but I'm craving pizza tonight for some reason. All right, today I have only brought with me one book, and that is The Meditation for Living in Balance, Daily Solutions for People Who Do Too Much by Ann Wilson Sheff. And the reason that I just brought this book today is because I read this meditation in here the other day, not on a video, but just like throughout the day, I picked up a different book, and I would read the meditation from it. And this meditation really, it really stood out to me. It really spoke to me. And, you know, I get asked a lot, like, Peter, you talk about, like, working on yourself, or you talk about, like, lessons that we learn in our lives and things like that, and lessons that are repeated until they are learned. And how do you know if you're learning? And how do you know if you're, like, accepting, you know, growth and things like that? And for me, it is when teaching lessons are offered to us, and it is our choice whether or not we take those as opportunities for growth. And there are some things that, like, timing has a lot to do with too. You know, that lessons that I am learning today in my life are lessons that 20 years ago, they weren't present in my life. Or maybe 20 years ago, I wasn't ready to learn those lessons. But today, I am ready to learn those lessons. And the meditation has to do with fear. And it was interesting because I don't know if I should read the meditation first or if I should share the story. So I recently did really extensive inventory with my sponsor. And when we do inventory in a 12-step program, we make a list of resentments and how it has affected us. And then we ultimately take a look at what our part is in that resentment, right? Like, are we hanging on to it, or did I do something as part of that? Or because typically we do have some part of that resentment. And really what it's about is realizing that that's the only thing that we can control, and going in there and changing it and saying, like, and what to do about it now. And my sponsor is really big on not living in the lie. And she'll say things to me like, you know, when I bring up a resentment and this is how I feel based on maybe years and years and years of something, she'll say, well, let's get out of the lie. Like, let's look at the truth of what's really going on here. Let's see if you have a part in it. And sometimes you don't have a part in it, you know, and my sponsor's role has been to say to me, you don't have a part in this at all. Like, there's nothing that's your part in this, right? And then you also go on and you do a list of, like, anger or fears. You do anger. You do fears, and then you also do a conduct list, and then you go over that with your sponsor. And with fears, for me, in this last inventory that I did, which we did, like, extensive inventory, like 2 sessions of sitting down for 9 hours each, going over all of this, right? And when it came to my fears, I had all of these fears that I didn't recognize. And I honestly was given this fear list, and it was like a list of probably, I don't know, 60 to 100 fears. And I just went down the list, and any of them that applied to me, including, like, doing inventory was on there. And I wrote down, fearful of doing inventory. And then when we went through the fears, one of the things that she said to me was, on each one, how are you managing that fear? And it was really an interesting question, because what I found out, which had you asked me that before I did the inventory, I'm not really sure that I was that aware of how I manage those fears. But how I manage them is just by stuffing them. I just push them down and act like out of sight, out of mind, I don't deal with them, right? And so when we did the second part of the inventory, something kept on coming up, you know, and I said to her something about, like, how do you, like, just let go of this and trust God? Which is really interesting because that was the topic of my meeting last night, was trusting God, right? Which, if you're a spiritual person, this will probably apply to you. If it's not, then just let this part go. But, you know, as a spiritual person, I try to be somebody that trusts my higher power. But it's difficult, you know, and I was, like, sharing in the meeting last night that I love to say that I'm a trusting person. I do believe that there's a path that I'm on. I do believe that I'm, on a journey. But like, put me in a really difficult situation, or put me like in a situation where I'm losing my mom or something like that. And, I don't know that in those moments I can just have blind faith of a higher power. Like, it's really hard, I do admire those people that just have absolute blind faith. I'm still working on that. I can't say that I have that. But what was interesting was that my sponsor said to me something that has so stuck out in my mind. Like, if I had to say 5 lessons I've learned this year, this is probably one of the top 5 lessons I've learned this year. She said to me, you can't pick your agnosticism. And I was like, what? And she said, you can't pick when you don't want God to work in your life. Like, you can't say, like, oh, like God is control, and God is my co-pilot, and all this kind of stuff. And without God, I couldn't do anything. And God doesn't bring me this far to drop me on my butt. And, with God, anything is possible. But then question God's motives, or question that God's not going to take care of something, right? And so, we were talking about praying, and, she gave me some assignments basically to pray and to just kind of try to let go of situations with prayer and trust and things like that. And like, that's been in my head, that you can't pick your agnosticism, right? Like, if you really are a person of like strong faith, then like you can't pick your agnosticism when you want to believe or not to believe that God has a plan, right? And that's such a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. And recently some book was brought to my attention, I think it's by C.S. Lewis, on like why there is pain in the world. And C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Narnia Chronicles, was also a person that wrote a lot about Christianity. And my spiritual beliefs kind of pick from a lot of different world religions, and then also just themes that I believe in, like compassion, kindness, forgiveness, understanding, and most of all, love. Did I say forgiveness? Forgiveness and love. And but this book was presented to me, and it was like, why bad things happen in the world, and is God in that? Or do bad things happen, and then God is how we get through those things? I didn't really expect this video to turn into such a God conversation, but it's interesting to me, that conversation, like, because I think people are like, well, when horrible things happen in the world, God isn't in all that, right? Well, had you asked me 10 or 15 years ago, I would have said that, there's a meaning or a purpose behind most things, that God is in that. I don't know that I necessarily believe that today. I don't. I believe today that things happen, horrible things happen in the world, but how we get through that is our relationship with our higher power, or our relationship with the universe, or, if you're an atheist or an agnostic, your relationship with understanding or logistically and analytically looking at situations. But I don't believe that God is necessarily in those horrible things. I think God is in how I deal with those things, And I can remember going through this relationship that I broke up, and I was like, years ago, and I was telling my mom, it was with my ex, and we broke up and we got back together. And I told her, I said, I'm like praying for this relationship to work out. And she said, oh, sweetie, we don't pray for things like that. We pray for like tolerance, understanding, compassion, love and understanding in situations like that, and forgiveness. Like, that's what we pray for. We don't pray for, just for like lottery wins and magic, to happen in our world, or things like that. I personally think it's okay to pray for things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it, and I'm also a believer that sometimes it's blessings in disguise. Sometimes you get your prayers answered, but maybe not the way that you want them to. So I have all this stuff, right? That's like all of these assignments sitting out on this desk that I'm learning. You can't pick your agnosticism. You have to let go and let God, You have to trust the process. All these things, right? And I don't know what to do with it. So the other day, did I not bring my I did bring my reading glasses. So the other day I opened this book, and the meditation was on fear. This is the one that I was going to read yesterday. Hold on a second, let me get to it. It's just titled Fear, I know that. It's on the 28th, okay. And this is what it says. And this is a quote from Erica Young. I have not ceased being fearful, but I have ceased to let fear control me. I have accepted fear as a part of life, specifically the fear of change, the fear of the unknown, and I have gone ahead despite the pounding in my heart that says, turn back, you'll die if you venture too far. When we live our lives in fear, we are always out of balance. When we deny our fear, we are also out of balance. I was like, okay, aha moment. And when we admit our fear and refuse to let it control us, we have the possibility of moving into balance. Wow. Fear is normal. It is part of the human experience, a necessary survival tool. Fear provides that alertness that lets us know when our survival is threatened. Fortunately, we are rarely in situations where our life is literally threatened. That doesn't mean we've laid fear to rest. We have developed our fears to deal with more subtle situations, most of which threaten our illusion of control, our self-esteem, and our need for stasis. When we recognize that, I thought it said status at first, but it says stasis. We have developed our fears to deal with more subtle situations, most of which threaten our illusion of control, our self-esteem, and our need for stasis. When we recognize this, we can relax a little and be less willing to hand our lives over to fear. Most fear stems from lack of faith. Catalog your fears, which is what I did in the inventory. See what's underneath each of them. This can help you get a handle on them. And you know, it was such a powerful meditation for me. I was like, oh wow, like, okay, to not try to get rid of these fears, to not try to necessarily manage these fears, but to be aware and accept the fact that I'm gonna have fear in my life. You know, we talk about in recovery that addiction is formed in 100 forms of fear, right? Okay, so it's kind of like bred into us in recovery that you gotta work on all these fears. But to acknowledge the fact and to accept the fact that there's always gonna be fear in my life, right? But I don't have to let it control me. I don't have to allow it to own me. I don't have to allow it to dictate my choices or my changes in my life. I just have to accept that there's going to be fear there. And then what, right? It's like with the definition of forgiveness. Forgiveness is looking at what happened in the past, accepting that what happened, not that it was okay, but accepting that it happened and then moving forward so that it doesn't hold you hostage, you know, to the past. It's like fear is the same thing. I mean, do you have fears that you've had since you were a kid? I know I do, you know, and some of those fears are irrational, like sharks, you know, and other fears are real ones, like fear of success or fear of failure or fear of people. You know, I've had a fear of people for a big part of my life that affected my social anxiety and stopped me from allowing myself to go places. I don't let that happen to me today. I participate in life, you know, and I've learned not to necessarily manage that fear, but to work through that fear a little bit and acknowledge that fear and be honest about it and share it with other people and say, yeah, this is a fear of mine, you know? And that's how I've worked on it today. And that's a good example for me on realizing that I'm gonna always have some fear in my life, and that's okay. I'm human, and I don't have to push all of that away and say, I'm not fearful, I'm confident, all that kind of stuff, you know? It's okay to say I am fearful of things. So I wanted to share that with you guys because I thought that was such a fantastic meditation, and it was such a learning lesson for me, something that I'll continue to be practicing for years to come. It's not like I'm gonna learn it overnight, but I loved that. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.